A tired widow makes a desperate joke to the town's feared biker, and the whole town holds its breath. She thinks it's bravado. He thinks it's a debt he must repay. But this isn't about offers or bargains. It's about a secret her late husband hid, papers that could bring down a powerful developer. When the developer pushes back, the town is shaken by vandalism, a near arson, and a hit and run that leaves a young helper fighting for his life. The biker leader refuses to buy their safety. He puts everything on the line to force the truth into daylight. Who will pay the real price for justice? And will this fragile new family survive when the past comes roaring back? The bell above Lily's cafe chimed softly in the pre-dawn darkness as Lillian Mercer unlocked the front door. The familiar scent of yesterday's coffee and fresh-baked pies welcomed her home like an old friend's embrace. She flicked on the lights, casting a warm, golden glow through the front windows onto Main Street's empty sidewalks, still slumbering under the fading stars. Her hands moved through the morning routine with practiced grace, sweeping the black and white checkered floor that had been walked upon by generations of townsfolk, lighting the ancient stove that Ben had fixed so many times she'd lost count. The temperamental old appliance sputtered to life with a wheeze and a cough before settling into a steady hum. Lillian arranged fresh-baked cherry and apple pies in the display case, their flaky crusts still warm from the oven, the fruit inside bubbling with sweetness. The quiet was broken only by the distant rumble of fishing boats heading out to sea, their engines thrumming like heartbeats across the water, and the gentle clink of cups as she set them in their places, each one finding its home on the worn wooden shelves. Her eyes caught Ben's favorite coffee mug in the drying rack, the one with the chip on the rim that he'd refused to throw away. Adds character, he'd always insisted with that lopsided grin that still made her heart skip even in memory. Next to it sat his photograph on the windowsill, edges worn soft from years of handling, countless touches of love and longing. His smile remained as bright as ever in the faded image, his eyes crinkling at the corners, even if the colors had faded like autumn leaves giving way to winter. The bell chimed again as Rose pushed through the door, still in her light blue clinic scrubs from the night shift. Dark, half-moon circles shadowed her eyes, but her movements were precise and purposeful as she tied on an apron, the fabric settling around her waist in a familiar embrace. "You should be heading home to sleep," Lily said, touching her eldest daughter's arm, feeling the slight tremble of fatigue beneath her fingertips. "I'll rest later. The morning rush needs both of us." Rose stifled a yawn behind her hand as she started the coffee maker, which gurgled to life, sending the rich aroma of fresh coffee swirling through the cafe like a comforting promise. The door opened again with a whoosh, bringing June in with a blast of salty air that ruffled the napkins on the nearest table. Her denim jacket bore fresh grease stains like battle badges, and she smelled of motor oil from her early morning work at Tommy's garage down the street. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her determined face. "Anyone seen my phone charger?" June asked, dropping into a booth with the casual grace of someone claiming their territory. She drummed her fingers against the worn tabletop, leaving faint smudges. "Battery's dead again." "Check the lost and found box," Rose replied, nodding toward the small cardboard container under the counter. Her voice carried the gentle authority of an older sister who'd answered such questions 1,000 times before. "And please wash your hands before you touch anything. You're tracking grease everywhere." The bell rang once more as Claire burst in, her dark hair streaked with blue ink and her eyes bright with excitement, practically dancing as she entered. Her cheeks were flushed pink from rushing, her breath coming in quick little puffs. "Mom! Rose! June! I got an email about that art scholarship I applied for." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Lily said, her heart warming at her youngest daughter's enthusiasm. But she noticed Claire's hands fidgeting with her sleeve. a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "What's wrong? I can see something's bothering you." "Well, they want a portfolio by next week, and the application fee is $200. Claire's excitement dimmed like a candle caught in a draft. She bit her lower lip, looking down at her worn sneakers. "I know the timing isn't great with everything else going on." June snorted from her booth, leaning back against the red vinyl seat. "When is timing ever great for us Mercers? It's like we've got permanent bad luck." "June," Rose warned with a sharp glance, but her eyes drifted to the paper stuck to the refrigerator, the eviction notice that had arrived 2 days ago, its official stamp like an ugly bruise on their morning routine, a wound that wouldn't heal. Lily watched her daughters, each so different yet unmistakably family. Rose organizing cups with military precision to hide her exhaustion, each movement careful and deliberate. June attacking a grease stain with hand soap at the sink, scrubbing with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. Claire sketching absently on a napkin, her talented fingers bringing life to the paper even in this moment of uncertainty. The notice gave them until the end of the month to pay or face foreclosure. The amount needed made her chest tight every time she thought about it, like a vice squeezing her heart. She crossed to the refrigerator and carefully folded the notice, the crisp paper making a sound like dry leaves underfoot. She tucked it into her apron pocket where it couldn't cast its shadow on their morning. The first customers would arrive soon, and they didn't need to see her worry. On cue, the bell chimed as early regulars began filing in. The postman, 2 fishermen still smelling of the sea, and Mrs. Henderson, who always ordered the same thing. Lily squared her shoulders, pulling strength from somewhere deep inside, and pasted on a warm smile that reached her eyes through sheer force of will. "Good morning," she called out, her voice steady and bright as sunshine breaking through clouds. "Coffee's fresh, and the pies just came out of the oven. Come on in and warm yourselves up." The late morning lull shattered as a deep rumble echoed down Main Street. Customers paused mid-bite, coffee cups hovering uncertainly in the air. Through the cafe's front windows, chrome glinted brilliantly in the sun as 5 motorcycles pulled up to the curb, their riders clad in worn leather jackets bearing the distinctive Hells Angels patches. The sound of powerful engines reverberated through the small space, causing the delicate bell chimes hanging near the door to tremble slightly. The pungent aroma of motor oil and leather cut through the sweet scent of freshly baked cinnamon rolls and robust coffee. Leading the group was Marcus Hawk Delaney, his scarred face and broad shoulders commanding immediate attention as he dismounted with practiced ease. His weathered boots hit the pavement with a solid thud that seemed to announce his presence even before he reached the door. A few locals hurried past on the sidewalk, quickening their pace and averting their eyes. Only old Joe Thompson, a retired Marine sitting at his usual spot by the window, gave a slight nod, which Hawk returned with quiet respect, a silent acknowledgement between men who understood sacrifice. Hawk paused at the window, his eyes finding the faded photograph of Ben displayed in a simple wooden frame. The picture showed a smiling man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that contrasted sharply with the hardened bikers outside. Lily's breath caught as a memory surfaced, Ben's warm laugh on a rainy night years ago, helping a younger Hawk with motorcycle trouble. The kitchen had smelled of apple pie that evening, and rain had drummed steadily on the roof while Ben worked patiently with Hawk in the garage. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Ben had said later, wiping grease from his hands with a red rag. "And that boy's got honor in him, mark my words." There had been a promise made that night, whispered words exchanged between the 2 men, though Lily had never learned its nature. The bell chimed cheerfully as the bikers filed in, their heavy boots scuffing against the worn linoleum floor. The cafe fell quiet except for the soft clink of silverware against plates and the comforting hiss of the coffee maker in the background. A toddler in a corner booth buried his face in his mother's shoulder. Hawk approached the counter, removing his riding gloves with deliberate care, his voice low and respectful. "Morning, Mrs. Mercer." "Welcome to Lily's," she replied, proud that her voice remained steady despite the flutter in her chest. She smoothed her apron with slightly trembling hands. "Coffee's fresh. Just made a new pot." The other riders settled into booths, their leather creaking as they arranged their bulky frames in the dainty cafe chairs. June emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, eyebrows raised at the unexpected customers. Her eyes darted questioningly to her mother, but Rose smoothly handed her a pot of coffee and nudged her forward with a reassuring smile. "How's Ben's family holding up?" Hawk asked quietly, as Lily brought him a slightly dog-eared menu, the plastic covering worn from years of use. She blinked, surprised by the genuine concern in his tone and the softness in his usually hard eyes. "We manage. Take each day as it comes. The girls are doing well. Rose at the clinic, always taking care of everyone. June with her mechanics, fixing just about anything with an engine. Claire starting college soon, art scholarship and all." Hawk nodded, his weathered face softening slightly beneath his graying beard. Ben was proud of them, talked about them often, carried their pictures in his wallet everywhere. The bikers ate steadily through heaping plates of golden eggs and crispy hash browns. Lily noticed how they kept their voices down, said please and thank you, left generous tips tucked beneath coffee cups. They treated her small cafe with unexpected respect. When they finished, Hawk paid their bill in cash and, with subtle grace that belied his rough exterior, slipped a folded $100 bill to old Joe at the counter, murmuring something about, "for the Veterans Fund," that made the older man's eyes mist slightly. Watching him care for the veteran, something snapped inside Lily. The weight of the eviction notice crinkled in her pocket, the memory of Ben's unwavering faith in this man, the desperate need to keep her family safe in the only home they'd ever known. Before she could stop herself, she blurted out across the table, her voice carrying in the quiet cafe. "Choose any of my daughters. You've earned it." The room went absolutely still. A fork clattered to the floor somewhere in the sudden silence, the sound unnaturally loud. The ceiling fan whirred overhead, marking seconds that stretched painfully. Lily's heart thundered in her chest as she realized what she'd just said, the words hanging in the air between them like a physical thing. The cafe air grew thick with tension as everyone waited for Hawk's response, his scarred face unreadable as his dark eyes locked with Lily's. Even the cook peered through the service window, spatula frozen in mid-air. The silence hung thick as honey, broken only by the soft whir of the ceiling fan. A few regulars, Pete from the hardware store and Sarah who worked at the bank, let out awkward chuckles that died quickly in their throats. Claire's face flushed deep red, and she spun on her heel, practically running to the kitchen. The swinging door clattered behind her. June's jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched in her cheek. Her fingers curled around the coffee pot like she might throw it. Only Rose kept her composure, stepping smoothly to their mother's side and placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. Hawk's expression shifted from shock to something gentler, sadder, like someone who'd just watched a child fall and couldn't catch them in time. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mercer," he said quietly but firmly. "Ben earned nothing like that, and neither have I." Lily's hands trembled as she twisted her apron. "I didn't mean— I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me." "Maybe we should talk privately," Hawk suggested, nodding toward an empty table near the window. Once they were seated, Away from straining ears, Hawk leaned forward. "Ben saved my life," he said simply. 15 years ago, outside Murphy's bar. I got into it with the wrong crowd, took a knife to the ribs. Ben pulled me out of there, got me to a doctor who didn't ask questions, sat with me all night." Lily could picture it. Ben had come home late that night, his shirt bloodied. He'd only said he'd helped someone in trouble. "That debt's been sitting heavy," Hawk continued, "but this isn't the way to settle it." He reached into his leather jacket and pulled out a folded paper. "The club's garage could use skilled hands. June's got a reputation for good work. We sponsor community rides, fundraisers for veterans, and—" He slid the paper across, "a repair voucher for motorcycle maintenance. This is good for any work needed, any time." "We can't accept charity," Lily protested, her pride stiffening her spine. "It's not charity, it's business." Hawk's voice was firm, but kind. "The veterans in town trust this place. Having somewhere they can gather, share a meal, that's worth more than money. Let us help with some outreach events. Good for them, good for the cafe." From behind the counter, Rose watched the conversation intently while wiping already clean glasses. June leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed but eyes sharp with interest. Claire had emerged from the kitchen, her cheeks still pink, but her artist's curiosity evident in the way she studied Hawk's weathered face. "Think about it overnight," Hawk said, standing. He left a business card next to the voucher. "No pressure? No strings?" He nodded to the sisters, a gesture of respect rather than familiarity, and headed for the door. The daughters exchanged glances, Rose thoughtful, June suspicious but intrigued, Claire uncertain but with a spark of hope in her eyes. Their mother sat at the table, staring at the card and voucher, her fingers still twisted in her apron as the rumble of motorcycles faded down Main Street. "We'll sleep on it," Rose said finally, breaking the silence. "That's all we have to decide right now." Steam rose from 5 mugs of chamomile tea around the scratched oak dining table. The kitchen's warm yellow light cast long shadows across worried faces as evening settled outside, the darkness pressing against the window panes like a curious neighbor. A plate of half-eaten cornbread sat forgotten in the center. Comfort food from their grandmother's recipe that usually solved everything, but tonight felt woefully inadequate against the weight of their situation. The honey butter beside it had melted into a small golden pool, untouched for the past 20 minutes. Lily smoothed the repair voucher on the table beside Hawk's business card, her fingertips lingering on the embossed motorcycle logo. The black card seemed both promise and warning against the worn wooden tabletop. "He was very clear about the terms," she said, her voice steady despite her earlier embarrassment when Hawk had witnessed her moment of weakness at the cafe. "Each of you would have different roles, if you want them. Nothing's being forced on anyone." June leaned forward, elbows on the table, her dark hair falling across her face. Her eyes held a spark of interest she couldn't quite disguise. "The garage work, is it real? Not just sweeping floors or getting coffee for the guys?" "Full apprenticeship," Lily confirmed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Paid training, hands-on work with their mechanics. Hawk said they need skilled hands. His exact words were, 'Someone who isn't afraid to get dirty and can think on their feet.'" A small smile tugged at June's lips, transforming her usually guarded expression. She'd been doing odd jobs at Tommy's garage for months, but nothing permanent or with any real future. "That's actually pretty perfect. I could learn actual trade skills." Rose set her mug down carefully, the ceramic making a soft clink against the wood. Her practical nature was already calculating the benefits and risks. "And the veteran outreach program? What would that involve exactly?" "Administrative work mainly. Coordinating events, managing paperwork, helping veterans navigate the system. There's a small stipend." Lily turned to her youngest, who had been quietly sketching on a napkin throughout the conversation. "Claire, he mentioned your art specifically. Said he'd seen your work around town. Design work for their events, plus running craft sales at their charity functions. You'd get commission on everything sold." Claire's eyes lit up with that dreamy brightness they all recognized. But she bit her lip, her enthusiasm dampened by reality. What would people say, though? The Mercer girls working with the Ravens? The whole town would talk. Mrs. Ellison at church already gives us those pitying looks. "They're already talking," June said bluntly, reaching for her lukewarm tea. "At least this way we'd get paid for it. Besides, who cares what Mrs. Ellison thinks? She gossips about the pastor's wife, too." The phone rang, cutting through their discussion like a knife. Lily checked the caller ID and sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. "Sheriff Brooks, I should have expected this." She put it on speaker, setting the phone in the middle of the table like an unwelcome guest. "Evening, Alan." "Lily?" The sheriff's gravelly voice filled the kitchen, bringing with it the weight of small-town scrutiny. "Heard about your visitors today? And about an unusual offer? Seems Marcus Delaney and his crew made quite an impression at the cafe." Rose's shoulders tensed visibly. She exchanged knowing glances with her sisters. News traveled at lightning speed in small towns, especially news that might raise eyebrows. "It's not what you think," Lily said quickly, a touch of defensiveness in her tone. "Hawk's offering legitimate work opportunities for the girls. You've known him a while, Alan. What's your honest take?" A long pause followed, filled only by static and the sound of papers shuffling. "Marcus Delaney's complicated. The club has a history, sure, but they've been straight with me these past few years. Clean record since they reopened that garage." They heard him shift in his chair, the familiar creak coming through the line. "Still, public opinion's a funny thing. Some folks might not understand why Ben Mercer's widow and daughters are suddenly friendly with the Ravens." "We need the work," June said firmly, leaning toward the phone. "And their garage is licensed, legitimate. I've checked the paperwork myself." "Not arguing that, June. Just saying, be careful, take precautions." His voice softened, revealing genuine concern beneath the official caution. "Lily, you know I'm here if you need anything, but I can't make any promises about how others might react. This town has long memories." After they hung up, silence settled over the kitchen again, thick as the honey on their forgotten cornbread. Rose traced the rim of her mug thoughtfully, her practical nature weighing options. "1 month," she said finally, looking up to meet her family's eyes. "We try it for 1 month, see how it goes. But we set boundaries, clear ones. We maintain our independence." Claire nodded eagerly, relief evident in her relaxing posture. "I could start with just a few designs, test the waters. Maybe just the flyers for their veteran fundraiser." "And I keep my morning shifts here," June added, determination hardening her features. "The garage work would be afternoons only. That way I'm still helping at the cafe during the breakfast rush." Lily watched her daughters, pride mixing with worry in her chest. They were Ben's girls through and through, practical, brave, willing to work hard when times got tough. Their faces in the warm kitchen light reminded her so much of him, it made her heart ache. "We do this as a family," she said, reaching out to place her hand in the center of the table. 1 month on our terms. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, we walk away. No questions asked." "Deal," Rose said firmly, placing her hand on top of her mother's, and her sisters quickly added theirs to the pile. They spent the next hour making detailed lists, schedules to coordinate, boundaries to maintain, contingency plans in case things went south. The tea grew cold in their mugs, but the kitchen felt warmer somehow, filled with purpose and cautious hope. Claire sketched potential designs on scrap paper, while Rose organized a family calendar. June pored over an old car repair manual, highlighting sections she wanted to learn more about. "We should get some sleep," Lily said finally, noticing Claire trying to hide a yawn behind her hand. "Tomorrow morning will come early enough, and we'll need clear heads to face whatever comes." As they cleared the mugs and wiped down the table, June paused beside her mother at the sink. "Mom? That thing you said to Hawk this morning at the cafe." She squeezed her mother's shoulder gently. "We know you were just scared. It's okay. We all say things we don't mean sometimes." Lily covered her daughter's hand with her own, water dripping from her fingers, grateful for the forgiveness, for the fierce strength of her girls. Tomorrow they would face the town's whispers together, the curious stares and raised eyebrows. But tonight they had a plan. Imperfect, uncertain, but their own. For the first time since the foreclosure notice had arrived, Lily felt something like hope flickering to life. The morning sun glinted off chrome and steel as June stepped into the club's garage. The scent of motor oil and metal hung thick in the air, mixing with the coastal breeze that drifted through the open bay doors. Her heart thumped with nervous energy, but she kept her chin high. The concrete floor beneath her boots was stained with years of grease and fuel spills, telling stories of countless repairs and restorations. She inhaled deeply, trying to calm her nerves as several club members glanced her way. Marco, a burly mechanic with graying temples and hands that looked like weathered leather, waved her over to a workbench cluttered with an assortment of wrenches, pliers, and sockets. "First things first," he said, laying out tools in a neat row, his calloused fingers moving with surprising gentleness. "Show me what you know." June picked up a socket wrench, turning it over in her palm, feeling its weight and balance before demonstrating the basics she'd learned at Tommy's garage. Her movements were deliberate, careful, wanting to prove herself. Marco nodded approvingly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Good foundation. Now let's build on it. You've got the makings of a real mechanic." The morning passed in a blur of practical lessons. June's hands grew black with grease as Marco taught her to change oil, check brake lines, and diagnose engine problems. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she leaned into her work, concentrating on every detail. The familiar clink of tools against metal became a comforting rhythm, drowning out her earlier doubts. With each successful task, her confidence grew stronger. Tommy Ruiz, one of the younger club members with tattoos snaking up his forearms and a perpetual half-smile, worked nearby on a gleaming black Harley. He caught her eye and grinned, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his back pocket. "Hey, new girl. Bet you can't name all these parts yet?" His tone was challenging but not unkind. June straightened up, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face with her forearm to avoid smearing grease on her skin. She rattled off the engine components without missing a beat, pointing to each one confidently. Tommy's eyebrows shot up, and he laughed, a genuine sound that echoed around the garage. Okay, you know your stuff. I'm impressed." "Some of it," June admitted, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. "Still got plenty to learn." But the smile tugging at her lips betrayed her pride. For the first time in weeks, she felt useful, capable of mastering something concrete. Across town, Rose organized files in the outreach office. The small room smelled of coffee and printer paper, a different kind of workplace entirely. Sunlight streamed through dusty blinds, illuminating floating dust motes as she worked. She created spreadsheets of veteran contacts, scheduled appointments, and answered phones with professional efficiency, her nursing background evident in her calm, attentive manner. The desk chair creaked as she leaned back, taking a moment to survey her progress. Boxes of disorganized paperwork had been transformed into color-coded folders, each labeled in her neat handwriting. A sense of order was emerging from chaos, something Rose always found deeply satisfying. Mid-morning, an elderly veteran in a worn army cap and a jacket too heavy for the season hobbled in. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, eyes clear but tired beneath bushy white brows. "Just wanted to thank you, folks," he said, voice gruff with emotion, leaning heavily on his cane. "The rideshare program got me to my VA appointment last week. Doctor said I might have missed my medication adjustment if I hadn't shown up. Means a lot." Rose felt a warmth in her chest as she helped him schedule his next ride, carefully writing down the details on a card for him in large print. His gratitude reminded her why she'd gone into healthcare in the first place, to make a difference, however small. This work mattered, regardless of what anyone thought about the club. At the community center, Claire bent over a long banner spread across 3 tables pushed together, her artistic vision taking shape in bright colors. Paint smudged her fingers and dotted her forearms as she worked with focused intensity. "Summer Veterans Fundraiser," it proclaimed in flowing letters, the blue and red design popping against the white background. She'd added subtle motorcycle silhouettes along the border, bridging both worlds in a design that felt inclusive rather than divisive. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hawk, approving her design mock-ups for event flyers. Claire smiled at the screen, a small victory. She dipped her brush in water, swirling it until the blue paint dispersed into clouds. Art had always been her refuge, her way of making sense of the world. Now maybe it could be something more, a bridge between communities. Lily kept the cafe running smoothly, filling coffee cups and delivering plates of homemade pie with her characteristic warmth, though she noticed the sideways glances from some customers. Mrs. Henderson, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair, whispered behind her menu to her friend, eyes darting toward Lily when she thought she wasn't looking. Mr. Parker's usual friendly wave seemed hesitant, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Lily felt the weight of their judgment but kept her head high, focusing instead on the food she served and the genuine smiles she received from loyal customers. The familiar rhythm of the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of silverware, the bell above the door announcing new arrivals, grounded her. But then something shifted the mood. A little boy, maybe 7 years old with scuffed knees and a Spider-Man t-shirt, trudged past the cafe window pulling a bicycle with a broken chain. His shoulders slumped in defeat, bottom lip quivering. Hawk, who'd been having coffee at the counter, his imposing figure softened by the delicate cafe mug in his large hands, noticed immediately. He set down his cup and stepped outside. "Having trouble there, buddy?" he asked, crouching down to eye level with the child, his voice gentler than his appearance would suggest. The boy nodded, sniffling and wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Can't get it fixed. Chain keeps falling off. Dad's away on the oil rig for 2 more weeks." Hawk gestured to Tommy, who had just arrived for his lunch break. Tommy jogged over with a small toolkit that he apparently carried with him. Together they showed the boy how to repair the chain, explaining each step in simple terms, letting him help tighten the bolts. The child's face lit up as he pedaled in circles on the sidewalk, testing their work, his earlier sadness forgotten. Through the window, Lily saw Mrs. Henderson's expression soften as she watched the scene unfold. Mr. Parker nodded approvingly, his earlier hesitation replaced with something like respect. Lily smiled to herself, serving up another piece of apple pie. Sometimes actions spoke louder than any defense she could offer. That evening, the Mercer kitchen buzzed with energy as the family shared their experiences over chicken pot pie, steam rising from the golden crust as Lily served each plate. The familiar scent of thyme and rosemary filled the room, mingling with the laughter and conversation. Marco says I have good instincts, June reported, still scrubbing engine grease from her hands at the kitchen sink, the water running. Gray. And Tommy's actually pretty cool. Knows his stuff. Showed me a trick for getting stubborn bolts loose that even Tommy at the old garage didn't know. Rose passed the breadbasket, warm rolls nestled in a checkered cloth. The filing system was a mess, but I've got it organized now. Created a whole new database for tracking services. And you should have seen this veteran today. So grateful for the simple help getting to appointments. Made me realize how many people fall through the cracks in the healthcare system. My designs got approved! Claire bounced in her seat, paint still visible beneath her fingernails despite her thorough washing. The fundraiser banner's almost done, and Hawk wants me to do all their event materials. He said my work speaks to people without shouting at them. Can you believe it? Lily smiled, watching her daughter's animated faces as she served herself last. The kitchen light caught the silver strands in her hair, legacy of years of single parenthood. And the cafe stayed busy, though I think that little bicycle repair demonstration wasn't entirely coincidental. Hawk understands small towns better than I gave him credit for. Hawk's smarter than people give him credit for, June observed, finally joining them at the table, her hands pink from scrubbing. He knows how to change minds without saying a word. Actions, not arguments. They ate together, sharing small victories and learning curves from their first day. The evening felt lighter somehow, despite the challenges ahead. The ticking of the kitchen clock, the one Ben had hung years ago, kept steady time as they talked, a reminder of his absence, but also his enduring presence in their home. Rose gathered plates as they finished, stacking them neatly beside the sink. One day down, she said, voice practical, but with an undercurrent of hope. 29 to go. We're 4% of the way there. We can do this, Claire added firmly, reaching over to squeeze her mother's hand. Together. Dad would be proud of how we're handling this. Lily watched her daughters, these strong women who'd grown from Ben's little girls, each so different, yet united in purpose. June's determination, Rose's steadiness, Claire's hopeful spirit. Combined, they were a force to be reckoned with. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it as a family, just as they always had. The late afternoon sun slanted through the town hall windows as Martha Jensen, the clerk, opened the day's mail. Her eyes widened at an official-looking envelope from Evergreen Development Corporation. The heavy cream-colored paper with its embossed logo sent a chill down her spine. Within minutes, phones started ringing across Main Street, the news spreading like wildfire through the close-knit community. The Evening Herald's headline appeared in bold print. Major developer eyes downtown for revitalization. The article detailed Evelyn Park's firm's intent to purchase multiple properties, including the entire block containing Lily's Cafe and the apartment above it. Glossy photographs of Evelyn's previous developments dominated the page, showcasing sleek buildings that looked nothing like their homey downtown. Did you see this? Betty from the flower shop hurried into the cafe, paper clutched in her hands, her normally composed face flushed with worry. The bell above the door jangled frantically with her rushed entrance. Lily was wiping down tables, preparing for the dinner crowd, the familiar scent of lemon polish filling the air. They're talking about turning the whole block into some kind of modern shopping complex. Our whole neighborhood, Lily. Lily took the paper with trembling hands, her dishcloth dropping forgotten to the floor. The proposed plan included sleek architectural renderings, glass-fronted boutiques, a chain coffee shop, and luxury residential units. The document cited urban renewal and economic growth opportunities, the sterile corporate language a stark contrast to the warm, lived-in feel of their current buildings. The law firm's letterhead stood out in crisp black type. Harrison & Wells, representing Evergreen Development Corporation. Below that, contact information for their representative, followed by proposed timeline and development phases. Each bullet point felt like another nail in the coffin of everything Lily held dear. At the town council building, voices carried through open windows into the street where passers-by couldn't help but overhear. Could bring in serious tax revenue, Councilman Peters mused to his colleagues, leaning back in his leather chair with an intrigued expression. Maybe it's time for some changes around here. We've been stuck in the past long enough. June was underneath a car at the garage when Marco tapped her boot with his own. She slid out on the creeper, wiping grease from her hands with a rag, noting his concerned expression and the unusual tension in his shoulders. Had some suits asking questions yesterday, he said quietly, glancing around the workshop where the sounds of clanging tools and rumbling engines normally provided comfort. Taking pictures of buildings, wanting property records. They weren't just looking, they were measuring, making notes. They were especially interested in this block. June's hands tightened on her wrench, the metal digging into her calloused palms. Developers, people? Marco nodded, his weathered face grave. They didn't look like regular real estate types, more like professionals, the kind you hire when you want something done quietly. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Across the garage, Hawk stood in his office doorway, arms crossed over his broad chest. His face was stone still, but his eyes tracked the street outside with newfound intensity, taking in every unfamiliar car that drove past with suspicious scrutiny. That evening, Lily spread the documents across their kitchen table, the warm yellow light, overhead casting shadows on the ominous paperwork. Rose held Claire's hand as their mother read aloud. Formal notice of intent to acquire fair market value compensation, necessary modernization of outdated structures. Her voice caught on the words that threatened to erase their history. They can't just force us out, Claire protested, her artistic sensitivity making her voice quiver with emotion. This was Dad's place. He built it for us, for the community. There are memories in these walls they can't put a price on. They're trying to make it legal, Rose observed, examining the paperwork with her methodical healthcare worker's eye. All the proper channels, all the right forms. They've been planning this for months, maybe years, waiting for the right moment. June paced the kitchen, still in her work clothes, grease stains on her jeans, her boots leaving faint marks on the worn linoleum floor. Marco says they've been casing the neighborhood. This isn't just paperwork. They're planning something. They're looking for weaknesses, pressure points. Lily's hands shook slightly as she stacked the papers, the wedding ring she still wore catching the light. Your father built this place with his own hands. Every nail, every board has his touch in it. We raised you girls here. I won't let them... A sharp knock at the cafe's front door cut her off, the sound echoing through the quiet space. They exchanged worried glances before moving as one toward the entrance. They found no one there, just a burned envelope on the welcome mat, its edges still warm to the touch. Inside was a family photograph from last Christmas, edges scorched and blackened, with a typed note. Leave. The smiling faces in the photo were partially melted, a deliberate desecration of their happiest moment. Lily's fingers trembled as she touched the damaged photo, tracing the outline of her daughter's faces. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, and Rose immediately reached for her phone to call the police, her nursing instincts kicking in during crisis. June's face flushed with anger, a vein pulsing at her temple. They're trying to scare us out before the legal stuff even starts. This is intimidation, plain and simple. Lily stared at the burned image of her family, her daughter's smiling faces, the cafe's Christmas decorations in the background, the handmade garland they'd spent hours creating together. The fear in her chest hardened into something stronger, something that reminded her of Ben's determination when faced with adversity. "We're not going anywhere," she said firmly, though her voice quivered with emotion. "This is our home. Your father would fight for it, and so will we." They huddled together in the darkened cafe, the burnt envelope on the counter between them, while outside the street lamps cast long shadows through the windows. The night seemed darker somehow, the familiar shapes of their neighborhood suddenly strange and threatening, transforming their sanctuary into something uncertain. Rose held the damaged photo carefully between her fingers, her medical training evident in her gentle touch. "We should document everything. Photos, notes, dates, anything they do. We need evidence if this escalates further." "I'll tell Hawk about this tomorrow," June added, her jaw set in determination. "He needs to know they're escalating. He might have connections that could help us figure out who delivered this." Lily touched the cafe's worn counter, feeling the smooth spot where decades of hands had rested. Ben's hands, her own, her daughter's, as they grew from children to women. Her girls watched her, waiting for guidance, for reassurance. The fear was still there, but now it shared space with determination. Someone wanted them gone badly enough to resort to threats. But this place wasn't just a building. It was their legacy, their future, their home. The wood and brick and mortar held their laughter, their tears, their history, in a way no sleek development ever could. The morning light crept through the cafe windows, casting a golden glow that highlighted the burnt edges of the photograph lying on the counter. Lily had barely slept, spending most of the night perched on the edge of her bed, jumping at every creaking floorboard and distant car engine outside their apartment above the cafe. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, but her spine remained straight as she prepared for the day ahead. Sheriff Alan Brooks's cruiser pulled up just after sunrise, the gravel crunching under its tires. He entered with his hat in his hands, his weathered face creased with concern as he carefully examined the threatening note and damaged photo with latex-gloved fingers. "This kind of intimidation is illegal, plain and simple," he said, taking careful notes in a small spiral notebook. "But proving who sent it?" He shook his head, lips pressed into a grim line. "I'll increase patrols in the area, have my deputies swing by every couple hours." Lily poured him coffee in a chipped blue mug while he explained their situation, his voice low and measured. "The eviction process has specific timelines laid out by state law. You've got rights. They can't just force you out overnight without due process. We can file for an emergency injunction if there's evidence of harassment or intimidation tactics." "But you can't stop the development company from moving forward?" Rose asked, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Not directly. It's all legal on paper." He lowered his voice, glancing toward the windows as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Listen, I've heard things about Evelyn Park's methods over in Fairfield County. She plays hardball, but usually stays just within the letter of the law. These threats, though, that's different territory altogether. Give me time to look into it properly." After he left, leaving behind the lingering scent of aftershave and "Coffee?" Lily called the attorney Hawk had recommended. The lawyer's voice crackled through the speakerphone as the family huddled around. "Document everything. Dates, times, photos, names. Nothing is too small to note," the attorney advised firmly. "And we need to check your late husband's records thoroughly. Did Ben ever have dealings with the developer? Any correspondence at all?" "He kept all his papers," Lily said, a hint of pride in her voice. "Dozens of boxes in the storage room behind the kitchen. He never threw out anything important. We'll start looking right away." At the garage across the street, June was elbow-deep in engine grease, methodically changing oil filters when she heard unfamiliar voices drifting through the open back door from the alley. A man in a pressed charcoal suit with a silk tie was talking to a contractor in a bright yellow hard hat, neither noticing they were within earshot. "Those bikers are trouble for the whole neighborhood," the suit said, checking his expensive watch impatiently. "Everyone knows they're running drugs through that garage. The whole block's going downhill fast. Perfect excuse for the city to invoke eminent domain when the time comes." June's hands clenched around the wrench she was holding, knuckles turning white as anger bubbled in her chest. She was halfway to the door when Tommy grabbed her arm firmly but gently, shaking his head. "Not worth it, kid," he whispered, his eyes wise beneath bushy eyebrows. "They're trying to provoke us. Get someone on camera looking threatening. Get it on record instead." He held up his phone, the red recording light already blinking steadily. At the county clerk's office downtown, Rose sifted through dusty property records and digital files, her nursing training giving her the patience for meticulous research. Something wasn't adding up in the records. "This easement should be here," she muttered, comparing yellowed old surveys to new digital ones on the screen. "Dad talked about it all the time. Some kind of historical protection for the original buildings on our block." The clerk, an older man with reading glasses perched on his nose, helped her search through additional archives, but the document was conspicuously absent. "That's odd," he said, scratching his balding head. "Records don't just disappear from county files. Someone would have had to deliberately remove it from the system." Meanwhile, back at the cafe, Claire was sorting through returned artwork from a recent community showing, carefully checking each piece for damage. Behind a large framed watercolor of the town square, she found a folded paper that had slipped loose from somewhere. Her father's familiar, slightly slanted handwriting caught her eye immediately, sending a wave of emotion through her chest. The paper contained a rough sketch of their block, with numbers, measurements, and arrows pointing to specific locations. Part of it looked like a map of underground structures, though some sections were unclear or marked with question marks. Claire's hands trembled as she studied it, her artist's eye recognizing the significance of her father's careful lines. What had her father known that was important enough to document so carefully? "Mom!" she called out, her voice cracking with excitement. "I found something of Dad's, something he drew." Lily hurried over from where she'd been wiping down tables, eyes widening as she stared at Ben's distinctive handwriting. "I don't understand all of this technical stuff," she said, tracing the lines with a gentle finger. "But he was always so careful about keeping records of anything important. If he drew this and kept it hidden, it meant something significant." Rose returned from the clerk's office, her face flushed with purpose as she shared her discovery about the mysteriously missing easement. June and Tommy arrived moments later, playing back the crystal-clear recording of the developer's men deliberately spreading lies about the motorcycle club. "They're trying to destroy our reputation in the community," June fumed, pacing the floor with restless energy. "Make it look like we're bringing down property values so no one will object when they push us out. And someone's systematically erasing official records that could legally protect us," Rose added, spreading her notes on the counter beside Claire's discovery. Lily carefully spread Ben's sketch on the counter under the warm cafe lights, studying it as if it might contain messages only she could decipher. "Your father was trying to tell us something important. We just need to figure out exactly what he discovered." The cafe's bell chimed cheerfully as the first lunch customers began arriving, bringing with them the sounds and scents of normal life. Lily tucked the sketch away safely in her apron pocket, forcing a welcoming smile onto her tired face. They had solid leads to follow now: Ben's paper collection to search through, the missing easement to track down, and concrete evidence of underhanded tactics to gather. But first, there were hungry people to feed and a business to keep running. "We'll figure this out," she promised her daughters, her voice quiet but filled with newfound determination. "Together, just like we've always done." The girls nodded in unison, each returning to their tasks with renewed purpose. June back to the garage with Tommy, Rose to organize their growing pile of findings, Claire to examine her father's mysterious sketch more closely with her trained artist's eye. But now they moved with purpose and hope, knowing they weren't just facing nameless threats in the dark anymore. They were fighting back, armed with their father's legacy and each other. Rose spread Ben's sketch across the kitchen table, tracing the lines with her finger. The afternoon sun slanted through the apartment windows above the cafe, casting shadows across the cryptic markings. These numbers, she mused, they look like property lot numbers. And these arrows, they're showing connections between buildings. June burst in, still wearing her grease-stained work shirt. You need to hear what those contractors were saying. Hawk wants to talk to us too. Minutes later, Hawk sat at their table, his presence filling the small kitchen. He listened intently as June repeated the contractor's words. They're building a paper trail, he said grimly, making us look bad so nobody questions when they push us out. Lily stood suddenly. Ben's papers. He kept everything. She headed for the hall closet where cardboard boxes sat stacked to the ceiling. Help me get these down. The family formed a line, passing boxes to the kitchen. Decades of receipts, letters, and documents filled their table. Claire started organizing them by date, while Rose created a makeshift filing system. Look at this, June said, holding up a folder. Property assessments from 5 years ago. Dad was tracking real estate values. Lily paused while flipping through one of Ben's old cookbooks, his favorite, spine cracked from use. A sealed envelope slipped from between its pages. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter, slightly yellow with age, addressed to Ben. The letterhead bore the name Coastal Development Partners, Evelyn Park's company. Dear Mr. Mercer, Rose read over her mother's shoulder. Regarding our discussion of the proposed land swap, she scanned further. There's mention of a ledger and, look, a councilman's signature. The letter referred to a series of meetings and included a page of what appeared to be coded entries, dates, dollar amounts, and initials. CDPEP to JM, 50K. Claire read. What's that mean? Coastal Development Partners, Evelyn Park to JM, Rose translated. And those initials, JM, that's James Morrison. He was on the city council back then. Lily sank into a chair, one hand pressed to her mouth. Ben was investigating them. All those late nights he spent doing paperwork. He was tracking something bigger. Why didn't he tell us? June demanded. To protect us, Hawk said quietly. Ben knew what these people were capable of. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. I was so angry with him sometimes, working such long hours. I didn't understand. Her voice broke. Rose squeezed her mother's shoulders. Dad was trying to stop them, and now we can finish what he started. We'll need to be careful, Hawk warned. These documents, they could be important evidence, but Park's people will try to discredit them, or worse. I'll scan everything tonight, Claire offered. Make digital copies. And I'll talk to some of my contacts, Hawk said. Have a few trusted folks keep watch on the cafe, just in case. Lily wiped her eyes, straightening her shoulders. First thing tomorrow, we take this to Allen, to Sheriff Brooks. Ben trusted him. They worked late into the evening, carefully documenting each piece of evidence. June and Tommy stood guard outside, while Claire photographed and scanned. Rose created a detailed inventory while Lily wrote down everything she could remember about Ben's behavior in the months before his death. The cafe below was dark and quiet, but upstairs, the family worked with renewed purpose. Ben's final gift to them wasn't just evidence, it was proof that he'd never stopped fighting for their home. Sheriff Allen Brooks arrived at Lily's cafe just before opening, his gray uniform pressed and badge gleaming in the morning light. He settled into a corner booth with a cup of coffee, carefully examining each document the family laid before him. "These are serious allegations," he said, making careful notes in his small leather notebook. The coded ledger entries, especially with James Morrison's initials, that could indicate improper dealings. Lily watched anxiously as he studied Ben's letter. "Can you help us stop the eviction?" "I can start an inquiry," Brooks said, his weathered face serious. "But legal processes take time. We'll need more than just these documents. Bank records showing the transfers, official meeting minutes that match these dates." Rose leaned forward. "What about the missing easement I found at the clerk's office?" "Good catch," Brooks nodded. "That's definitely irregular, but we need to prove it wasn't just a filing error." Outside the cafe windows, early morning customers peered in curiously at the sheriff's presence. Claire nervously adjusted the blinds while June paced, her work boots scuffing the floor. "I can talk to some people," June said. "Tommy and I know folks who've been around forever." Brooks finished his coffee. "Be careful. Discreet inquiries only. These developer types, they play hardball with anyone who threatens their plans." After Brooks left, Hawk appeared at the back door. He listened intently as June explained their need for witnesses. "Tommy can help you check with our contacts," he said. "Start with old Joe. He worked at City Hall for 30 years before retiring." June and Tommy took his motorcycle across town to a small house with an overgrown garden. Old Joe, stooped but sharp-eyed, invited them onto his porch. "Ben Mercer?" he wheezed, settling into a creaking chair. "Oh yeah, I remember him raising hell about some title transfers. Must have been 5-6 years back. He demanded to see everything signed by Walter Chen. He was deputy city manager back then." "Walter Chen," Tommy repeated, typing the name into his phone. "Did Ben say why he was looking?" "Something about irregular permits," Joe said. "Ben was like a dog with a bone when he thought something wasn't right." While June and Tommy gathered information, Rose and Claire helped Lily with the morning rush at the cafe. Just before lunch, a sharp knock interrupted their routine. A man in an expensive suit taped an official notice to the cafe's front door. "What's that?" Claire asked, watching through the window as the wife-Itos man hurried away. Rose went to look. Her face paled as she read. "It's a condemnation notice. They're saying the building isn't up to code. We have 72 hours to fix violations or they'll shut us down." Word spread quickly through the small town. All afternoon, customers came in offering support and outrage. Some took photos of the notice, sharing them on social media. Others promised to call their council representatives. As evening fell, Lily closed early. The family gathered around their kitchen table, where Claire had lit several candles. Their faces were serious in the flickering light. 3 days, June said grimly. "That's all they're giving us." "They're trying to force us out before we can expose them," Rose added. Lily looked at each of her daughters' faces, seeing Ben's determination reflected in their eyes. "Your father believed in doing what's right, no matter how hard the fight. We owe it to him, and to ourselves, to see this through." Claire reached for her mother's hand. "We'll find the proof. All of us, together." Outside, the town settled into evening quiet. Inside the apartment above Lily's cafe, 4 women drew strength from each other, preparing for the battle ahead. The candles burned steadily, like their resolve, as they planned their next moves in the race against time. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Claire taped up the last fundraiser poster. Her design featured a motorcycle surrounded by hearts and the words, "Ride for Justice, Support Lily's Cafe," in bold letters. "They look great," Rose called from the sidewalk, checking items off her clipboard. "The registration table goes here, bake sale there, and we'll set up craft booths along the wall." June emerged from a huddle with Hawk and Tommy, holding a marked-up map. "Route's all set. 30 miles through the prettiest coastal roads. Should take about an hour. By noon, the street hummed with activity. Motorcycles lined both curbs while families browsed tables loaded with homemade pies and crafts. Claire's art booth displayed watercolor scenes of the town, including a striking portrait of her father's old coffee mug in the cafe window. "Thank you all for coming," Lily addressed the crowd from the cafe steps. Her voice wavered but grew stronger as she continued. "This place isn't just a business. It's our home, our community's gathering spot. We're fighting to keep it that way." Veterans took turns sharing stories about Ben's kindness. Free meals during hard times, quiet conversations over coffee, job leads passed along. An elderly man described how Ben had helped his grandson get into trade school. "Your dad was one of the good ones," Hawk said softly to June as they watched from near the registration table. She nodded, blinking back tears. The afternoon progressed smoothly. Rose efficiently directed volunteers while Claire sold several paintings. June led the charity ride, returning with wind-blown hair and a genuine smile as supporters cheered. But at 4:30, everything changed. The first crash came from the cafe, shattering glass and screams as a brick smashed through the front window. Before anyone could react, Claire's art booth toppled, sending paintings and easels flying. A dark bottle rolled across the pavement, reeking of gasoline, a rag stuffed in its neck. "Everyone back!" Hawk shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Tommy spotted a figure in black running down an alley. "Got him!" He sprinted after the suspect while June called for Sheriff Brooks. The screech of tires filled the air. Tommy flew through the air as a black SUV struck him at the alley's entrance. His body hit the pavement with a sickening thud. "Tommy!" June screamed, running to where he lay motionless. Hawk was already there, checking vitals with steady hands despite his pale face. "He's breathing. Get the van now," Hawk ordered. 2 club members rushed to bring their vehicle around while Rose knelt to assess Tommy's injuries. "Possible head trauma, broken ribs," she reported professionally, though her hands shook. "We need to get him to Memorial, fast." They carefully loaded Tommy into the van. June climbed in without hesitation, her eyes never leaving Tommy's face. Hawk jumped behind the wheel, and they roared off toward the hospital with hazard lights flashing. Sheriff Brooks arrived minutes later to find the street in disarray. News vans appeared, reporters already spinning narratives about motorcycle gang violence. Claire hugged her mother as they watched Brooks organize his deputies to secure the scene. "Everyone please remain calm," Brooks announced. "We'll take statements from witnesses. This kind of violence won't be tolerated in our town." At Memorial Hospital, Hawk paced the emergency room waiting area like a caged animal. His leather cut seemed out of place against the sterile walls, but his worry was painfully human. June sat rigid in a plastic chair, still wearing her riding jacket, waiting for news about Tommy. The sun set over the small coastal town, casting orange light through the hospital windows. What had started as a day of hope had descended into chaos, leaving the community shaken and a young man fighting for his life. Fluorescent lights hummed in the hospital corridor as midnight approached. June sat beside Tommy's bed, her fingers intertwined with his. The steady beep of monitors marked time, while an IV dripped steadily into his arm. "Hey there, tough guy," June whispered, as Tommy's eyes fluttered open. His face was bruised, and bandages wrapped his ribs, but the doctors had confirmed no life-threatening injuries. Did you get the plate number of that truck?" Tommy tried to joke, then winced. "Don't try to be funny right now," June scolded gently, but her thumb stroked his palm. From the doorway, Hawk watched silently. His usual commanding presence had softened, worry etched in the lines around his eyes. Rose had gone to get coffee, while Lily and Claire dozed in waiting room chairs. A nurse came in to check Tommy's vitals. "He needs rest," she said kindly but firmly. June's phone buzzed. Her sister had sent a link to the local news website. The headline made her stomach clench. "Motorcycle gang violence erupts at community event. Local business under siege." "They're twisting everything," June muttered, showing Hawk the article. He nodded grimly. "Always do, but we know the truth." At 3 a.m, Lily's phone rang. She stepped into the hallway to answer it, returning moments later with tears in her eyes. "The bank," she explained quietly. "They're accelerating the foreclosure. Something about a violence clause in the insurance policy triggering immediate default." Rose's nursing experience showed in her precise movements as she adjusted Tommy's blanket. "This isn't coincidence. The timing's too perfect." "Town's already talking," Claire added, scrolling through social media. "People are scared. They're saying we brought trouble." Dawn painted the hospital windows pink when a club member arrived with news. He pulled Hawk aside, speaking in low tones while holding up a USB drive. Rose followed them to a small consultation room where a laptop was set up. The security footage was grainy but clear enough. A black pickup pursuing Tommy down the alley before the hit and run. Though the faces weren't visible, the license plate showed clearly in one frame. "My contact at the DMV traced it," the club member explained. "Registered to Peninsula Holdings LLC." Rose's eyes widened. "That's one of Evelyn Park's shell companies. I saw it in the property records." Sheriff Brooks arrived as they were reviewing the footage again. His uniform was wrinkled from a long night, but his eyes were sharp. "This changes things," he said, watching the video. "Gives us probable cause to dig deeper. The town council meets tomorrow morning. We can present this evidence formally." Hawk's jaw tightened. "No more playing nice. We do this by the book, but we don't back down." "I'll bring the property records and Ben's papers," Rose said. "Everything goes on public record." Tommy stirred in his hospital bed as sunlight filled the room. June hadn't left his side. "You should go home, get some rest," he told her. "Not a chance," she replied, squeezing his hand. The night's revelations had hardened something in her. "We're fighting back, all of us together." Down in the hospital cafeteria, Lily stirred her untouched coffee while Sheriff Brooks and Hawk discussed strategy. The morning news showed more negative coverage, but they barely noticed. They had evidence now, and with it, hope. Rose's fingers flew across the keyboard in the county clerk's office. Her eyes were tired, but determination kept her focused as she filled out yet another Freedom of Information Act request form. "Fifth one today," she muttered, double-checking the dates and department codes. The clerk, an older woman named Martha, approached with a stack of folders. "Found these in the archive," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Meeting minutes from when that developer first came to town." Rose flipped through the pages, noting heavy black redaction marks across key sections. But there it was, a single memo header reading Land Revitalization Initiative that hadn't been properly filed. Across town at the garage, June wiped grease from her hands as she studied bank statements spread across a workbench. Hawk stood beside her, his face grim. "Look at these deposits," she said, pointing to a series of numbers. "Always exactly $25,000, just under the reporting threshold." The former bookkeeper who'd provided the records, a thin man named Walter, fidgeted nearby. "I couldn't sleep knowing what I knew," he admitted. "But if they find out I showed you—" "Nobody will know," Hawk assured him. "You did the right thing." Back at the cafe, Claire had taken over a corner table with Ben's sketched map and stacks of dated papers. She drew careful lines connecting dates to locations, creating a visual timeline of property purchases. "Dad wasn't just keeping records," she explained to Lily. "He was tracking a pattern. Every time Evelyn's company bought land, These shell companies made deposits to Councilman Parker's accounts. Sheriff Brooks arrived with fresh coffee and worse news. Evelyn's lawyer is making the rounds at the TV stations. They're painting the club as thugs and claiming harassment. The local news played on the cafe's small TV. Evelyn Park stood at a podium, perfectly polished in a business suit. "We simply want to revitalize this struggling neighborhood," she said smoothly. "But certain elements are using intimidation to prevent progress." June slammed her hand on the counter. "She's the one who had Tommy run down." "We need proof that will stand up in court," Rose reminded her. "These records are a start, but—" The bell over the door chimed as Tommy hobbled in on crutches. June rushed to help him to a chair. "Council's called an emergency session," he reported. "Day after tomorrow. They're voting on immediate condemnation of this whole block." Lily's face paled. "But we haven't had time to present the evidence." "That's the point," Hawk said quietly. "They're trying to push it through before we can build our case." The next day was a blur of activity. Rose coordinated with Sheriff Brooks to formally request financial audits. Claire finished her timeline visualization, making it clear enough for the public to understand. June and Tommy gathered statements from other property owners who'd been pressured to sell, but the town was dividing. Some supported the developers' promises of new jobs and growth. Others stood with the Mercers, remembering Ben's generosity and questioning the rushed process. By evening, Lily's cafe had become an impromptu war room. Maps, documents, and photos covered every surface. The family gathered, with Hawk and Sheriff Brooks to prepare their presentation for the hearing. 2 minutes per speaker, Rose read from the council rules. "We need to make every second count." "I'll speak first," Lily said firmly. "Ben believed in this town, in doing things right. I won't let them erase that." Claire arranged her visual aids while June practiced her testimony about the attack on Tommy. Outside, more news vans arrived, their satellite dishes reaching into the darkening sky. Tommy watched them through the window. "Whatever happens at that hearing," he said, "you're not alone in this fight." Hawk nodded, his presence steady and reassuring. "Ben stood up for what was right. Now we do the same." They worked late into the night, organizing evidence and rehearsing their arguments. The hearing loomed just hours away, their last chance to save not just the cafe, but the truth Ben had died protecting. The morning sun streamed through Town Hall's tall windows, casting long shadows across the packed chamber. Every wooden bench creaked with the weight of concerned citizens. Camera crews jostled for position near the walls, their red recording lights blinking like watchful eyes. Lily smoothed her cafe apron. She'd come straight from the morning shift, and sat with her daughters in the front row. Rose clutched a folder of documents while June bounced her knee nervously. Claire's fingers were stained with marker ink from last-minute edits to their presentation boards. At the back of the room, Hawk stood with his arms crossed, flanked by club members in their cleaned-up leather jackets. Sheriff Brooks leaned against the doorframe, notebook in hand. A local college student had set up a laptop for live streaming, the chat already flooding with community comments. Evelyn Park sat at the petitioner's table, perfectly composed in a navy suit. Her lawyer shuffled papers while her PR team whispered in the row behind them. The 7 council members filed in, led by Richard Hale, his silver hair catching the light. "This emergency session will come to order," Mayor Wilson announced, banging his gavel. "We're here to address the proposed condemnation of properties along Main Street Block 372. Evelyn's lawyer rose first, smooth and practiced. "Our firm has invested considerable resources in revitalizing struggling communities," he began. "The properties in question have fallen into disrepair. We offer fair market value and new employment opportunities." He clicked through slides showing architect renderings, gleaming storefronts, wide sidewalks, No trace of Lily's cafe or the other family businesses that had stood for generations. When it was their turn, Rose stepped up first with the evidence folder. "We have documentation of irregular financial transactions related to this development," she said, her voice steady, "beginning with this ledger found in my father's papers." The projector displayed Ben's careful handwriting, dates, amounts, notes about meetings. "These entries correspond with bank transfers to shell companies," Rose continued, laying out statement copies. "Our witness, Walter Green, former bookkeeper at First State Bank, can confirm the pattern." Walter stood shakily, his tie crooked. "The deposits were always just under $25,000, he testified, "made to accounts connected to council members through shell corporations." A murmur rippled through the crowd. June presented the dash cam footage next, the grainy video showing the truck that had hit Tommy. Claire followed with her timeline visualization, connecting the developer's land acquisitions to the suspicious payments. "And this memo," Rose concluded, holding up the partially redacted document, "shows the development plan was created months before any public announcement, with specific properties already targeted." The room fell silent as she placed the final piece of evidence on the council's table, a bank transfer slip bearing Councilman Hale's signature, authorizing funds to one of the shell companies. Richard Hale's face drained of color. He stared at his own signature while cameras flashed and reporters scribbled furiously. Evelyn's lawyer jumped up. "These accusations are baseless. Mr. Green was terminated for incompetence. The dashcam footage is inadmissible without proper chain of custody. This is clearly a desperate attempt by criminal elements to maintain their grip on our town." "I'll submit my personal records," Hawk's deep voice cut through the chaos. He stepped forward, holding up a leather portfolio. "Every receipt, every transaction between my club and Ben Mercer. He was investigating corruption, not participating in it." Sheriff Brooks pushed off from the wall. "Given these new allegations, I recommend immediate adjournment. My office needs to pursue these leads, and I'll be requesting an injunction against any condemnation proceedings until we complete our investigation." The council members huddled in whispered discussion, while the room buzzed with tension. Finally, Mayor Wilson raised his gavel. "The council votes to delay enforcement pending formal investigation," he announced. "This session is adjourned." Relief swept through Lily's family, but the crowd's reaction split the room, some cheering, others shouting accusations. Evelyn's team hurried her out a side door, while reporters swarmed Richard Hale, who sat motionless, staring at his hands. As the chamber slowly emptied, Lily turned to find Hawk standing behind her family's bench, a steady presence in the storm they'd just weathered. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as state police vehicles rolled into town. Sheriff Brooks stood on the courthouse steps, coordinating with investigators in dark windbreakers emblazoned with State Task Force in bold letters. "We'll start with Councilman Hale's office," Brooks directed, holding up a thick stack of warrants. "Then move to Park Development Group's local headquarters." Inside the municipal building, officers methodically boxed documents and hard drives. Richard Hale watched silently from the hallway, his council pin already removed from his lapel. His secretary dabbed at her eyes as investigators sealed her computer in evidence tape. "Sir, we'll need your keys and passwords," a detective said firmly, holding out an evidence envelope. Hale's hands trembled as he dropped his keyring inside. Across town at Park Development Group, Evelyn Park maintained her corporate composure as officers entered her glass-walled office. She sat ramrod straight while they served her with multiple subpoenas, her lawyer hovering anxiously. "These documents demand immediate preservation of all communications regarding the Main Street project," the lead investigator explained, laying out paper after paper, including correspondence with council members and contractors. "Of course," Evelyn replied smoothly. "We maintain the highest ethical standards." but her practiced smile slipped when they began photographing the contents of her filing cabinets. News vans gathered in the parking lot below, cameras trained on every window. At Lily's Cafe, reporters clustered outside, while regular customers showed their support by filling every table. Rose helped her mother serve coffee to state investigators who stopped in between searches. "The whole town's buzzing," June said, wiping down the counter. "Did you see they put Hale on administrative leave?" Claire looked up from sketching the scene. "Good. After what they tried to do to Tommy." The bell over the door chimed, and conversations hushed as Marcus Hawk Delaney entered, wearing a clean dress shirt instead of his usual leather. His face was grim but determined. "Sheriff Brooks," he called out to where Brooks sat reviewing papers. "I need to speak with you." The sheriff looked up, noting Hawk's unusual attire. "Step into the back room." Lily followed them, anxiety tightening her chest as Hawk explained his purpose. "There's an outstanding warrant from 10 years ago," he said quietly. "A bar fight that turned ugly. Ben helped me that night, kept me from making it worse. I never cleared it up properly." "Hawk, no," Lily whispered, understanding dawning. "If I turn myself in now, voluntarily," he continued, "it opens up the sealed records, shows the pattern of how developers used local trouble to push their agenda, and it proves I'm not hiding anything." June burst through the door. "You can't do this! We need you here!" "This is exactly what I need to do," Hawk replied, his voice gentle but firm. "They've been using my reputation against us, saying I'm intimidating people. This way, everything's in the open." Sheriff Brooks nodded slowly. "You understand I'll have to take you in properly? Cuffs and all?" "I know." Hawk held out his wrists. The cafe fell silent as Brooks led Hawk out in handcuffs. Lily pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling despite her efforts to stay strong. June gripped the counter until her knuckles went white. "It's okay," Hawk assured them as he passed. "Sometimes you have to sacrifice a piece to win the game." Outside, phones recorded video as the sheriff helped Hawk into the patrol car. But this wasn't like the usual arrests people had seen. There was dignity in how both men conducted themselves, respect in how Brooks closed the door. At the station, Hawk went through booking calmly. His fingerprints were taken, his belongings catalogued. The desk sergeant, who had known him for years, processed the paperwork with obvious discomfort. "Never thought I'd see you turn yourself in," the sergeant muttered. "People can surprise you," Hawk replied simply. Word spread quickly through the town. The man they'd feared was voluntarily facing his past to help save their future. It challenged everything they thought they knew about the motorcycle club leader. By afternoon, a small crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office, not to protest, but to witness this unexpected act of sacrifice. Among them stood veterans Hawk had helped, kids whose bikes he'd fixed, and business owners who were starting to see him in a new light. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as investigators carried boxes of evidence through the heavy doors. Inside, clerks worked overtime processing newly unsealed records from Hawk's old case file. What emerged painted a devastating picture. Rose sat with Sheriff Brooks, helping sort through emails and bank statements. Her medical training made her methodical, tracking dates and amounts in neat columns. "Look at this," she said, pushing a document across the desk. The same day Ben confronted Councilman Hale about the missing easements, a shell company transferred $50,000 to an offshore account. Brooks nodded grimly. "And here's Evelyn Park's signature authorizing it." By noon, squad cars pulled up to Park Development Group. Evelyn's perfect composure finally cracked as officers led her out in handcuffs, her designer blazer wrinkled, her carefully styled hair falling loose. At the council chambers, Hale sat stone-faced as the ethics board announced his suspension. The grand jury would convene within the week. The evidence suggests a pattern of corruption spanning several years, the board chairman declared, his voice heavy with disappointment. At Memorial Hospital, June helped Tommy into a wheelchair. His head was bandaged, but his smile was bright. "Easy there, hotshot," she teased, steadying him as he wobbled. "I've had worse wipeouts on my bike," Tommy joked, then turned serious. "They want me to make a statement about what happened." A small camera crew set up in the hospital room. Tommy spoke clearly, despite his injuries. "I saw the truck coming straight at me. They weren't trying to stop. They were trying to silence us." Back at Lily's cafe, the community rallied. Mrs. Peterson from the flower shop brought fresh arrangements. Mr. Chen from the hardware store arrived with new glass for the broken window. High school students painted cheerful signs. "We stand with lilies." Claire organized an impromptu art sale on the sidewalk, her paintings now showing scenes of town unity, motorcycles parked beside family sedans, veterans sharing coffee with business owners. "The money's going to help with legal fees," she explained to customers, "but really, it's about showing we're all in this together." Late that afternoon, a courier delivered a small package to Lily. Inside was a worn pocket watch, its silver case dulled with age. A scratch marked the back where Ben had once caught it on a nail while fixing the cafe's screen door. Lily's hands shook as she read Hawk's letter. "Ben gave me this watch the night he saved my life. Said every man deserves a second chance to make things right. I kept it as a reminder that debts aren't just about money. They're about honor. Your family helped me remember that. The watch belongs with you now." The next evening, word spread quickly. Hawk was being released. He had cooperated fully, providing crucial testimony that helped break open the corruption case. The temporary injunction against the property seizures would hold until all criminal matters were resolved. As sunset painted the sky orange, a distant rumble grew louder. Townspeople gathered on Main Street, watching as motorcycles appeared on the horizon. This time, no one hurried inside or pulled children close. The riders moved slowly, respectfully, 2 by 2 in perfect formation. Hawk led them, his leather vest clean and proud on his shoulders. The procession passed Lily's cafe, where the new window gleamed and fresh flowers brightened the sidewalk. Each rider raised a hand in salute. Tommy, supported by June, stood straight despite his injuries. Rose and Claire flanked their mother as she stepped outside, the pocket watch warm in her apron pocket. The bikers parked in neat rows, engines falling silent. Hawk dismounted and walked to where Lily waited. No words were needed. The grateful tears in her eyes said everything about debts repaid and trust restored. Around them, the town had changed. Not just in the physical evidence of community support, but in the way people looked at each other, past surface judgments to the deeper truth of human connection. Dawn light filtered through freshly washed windows at Lily's cafe. The aroma of coffee and cinnamon rolls mingled with the salty breeze off the coast. Inside, tables had been arranged in long rows, draped with checkered cloths and decorated with wildflowers from Mrs. Peterson's garden. 8 o'clock sharp, Rose reminded, checking her watch. Pastor Williams wants everyone seated for the blessing. June wrestled with a stubborn coffee urn. Got it covered, sis, though I'm better with carburetors than these ancient pots. Claire put finishing touches on the covered mural outside, her hands speckled with paint. The morning dew had left the wall slightly damp, perfect for the final protective coat. By 7:45, motorcycles rumbled up Main Street. This time, children ran to watch them park, pointing at the chrome and leather with excitement rather than fear. Hawk dismounted first, looking almost uncomfortable in a clean button-down shirt under his vest. Quite a turnout, he said quietly to Lily, as townspeople filled the sidewalks. The cafe doors opened at 8. Pastor Williams stood at the front, his weathered face beaming as he raised his hands for silence. "Let us give thanks," he began, "for second chances and new beginnings, for neighbors becoming family and strangers becoming friends." Sheriff Brooks spoke next, his badge catching the morning light. "What happened here wasn't just about stopping corruption. It was about a town remembering its heart." He nodded toward Hawk. "Sometimes heroes come from unexpected places." Rose stepped up to the makeshift podium, smoothing her nurse's uniform. "The Veteran Outreach Program is now officially funded through next year," she announced. "We've already helped 30 families access medical care and housing assistance." Her voice caught. Dad would be proud to see his community taking care of its own. When Hawk stood to speak, the room hushed. His usual commanding presence seemed softer, more human. "Ben Mercer gave me a second chance years ago," he said, his deep voice carrying to the corners. "He didn't see a criminal. He saw a man who could choose a better path." Hawk paused, looking at Lily and her daughters. "Honor isn't about power or fear. It's about keeping your word, protecting family, blood or chosen, and standing up for what's right. This town taught me that." Claire's unveiling of the mural drew gasps and quiet tears. She had captured Ben's kind eyes and gentle smile, but the background showed the whole town: the cafe, the garage, bikes and cars, children playing, veterans standing tall. Above it all, in flowing script, "Community is family." After the crowds thinned, Hawk found Lily in the quiet kitchen. He pulled out the pocket watch, its silver case newly polished. "Ben gave me this the night he pulled me out of that fight," he explained. "I was bleeding bad, angry at the world. He said a man's worth isn't in his mistakes, but in how he makes them right." Hawk's fingers traced the scratch on the back. "That night, he made me promise to look after his family if anything happened to him. Not to buy you out, to protect you, help you thrive." Lily took the watch, tears spilling. "You were never buying us," she whispered. "You were saving us." By late afternoon, the news was official. Park Development's plans were permanently shelved. The town council approved a small grant for the club's community programs, and June signed papers for her own repair bay next to Tommy's workspace. Claire burst in waving an envelope. "The Arts Council approved my grant. I can teach summer workshops right here in the cafe." The family gathered at their favorite corner table as evening approached. Sunlight slanted through the windows, turning everything golden. Rose's medical files shared space with June's repair manuals and Claire's sketches. Lily served fresh coffee in Ben's old mug, now joined by others marked with motorcycle club logos. Outside, bikes started up, their rumble familiar now, comforting. The sound faded into the summer breeze, carrying with it the promise of more Sunday rides, more community breakfasts, more chosen family gatherings in this place where hope and healing had won the day.